Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've been out fishing. I'm getting kind of excited now that my home water, where I spend most of my time fishing, hasn't been fishable since March, really, the very beginning of March, when I was trying salmon with a single-handed rod because it was so low. The rain came and it's not really been fishable for trout ever since. So I'll be watching the gauges overnight. My fingers are very, very tightly crossed that I get to throw a dry, perhaps even a rising trout tomorrow. So super excited about that. But I'm really looking forward to introducing you to my guest today, who has already, judging by his social media post, has had a great start to the fishing season. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about it and to learn about his fishing timeline. I think there'll be some fishing tips in there as well, to learn about what fly fishing means to him. And I'd like to give a really warm welcome to probably somebody who's got the coolest name, I think, anyway, in fly fishing, Tiger Stamp. Tiger, it's great to have you along on the Fly Culture Podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, it's a pleasure. And I've been really looking forward to seeing, as I said, in your social media, it looks as though you're completely tearing it up this season. It looks as though it has been a good start for you.
Yeah, it's been great, to be honest. Slightly surprised with how well it's gone so early on. Normally it takes me a good little while to get into it, and especially with switching to Dries this season mainly. I've achieved my main goal already for the dry fly fishing this year. So yeah, it's been a great start.
Fantastic. And the hatch has been, well, let's get a sense of where you're fishing. Whereabouts are you based for our listeners? And do you have a home water, or are you somebody who likes to mix rivers up and move around rivers and fish in a number of places?
So yeah, I'm based in South Manchester, around the Stockport area, and my local rivers would be the River Goyt and the Tame, which of course flow together to make the Mersey. So I do quite a bit of fishing on the Goyt and the Tame. The Tame itself is quite a polluted river. It's made quite a few headlines for that in the past. So the hatches on there are quite inconsistent and not very varied. The Goyt's slightly healthier, but for any quality hatch, you've sort of got to travel a little bit from Manchester, which is just a bit of a shame. But, when you do it, it's worth it.
Absolutely. And I was very lucky. I know one of your fishing buddies took me along to fish the Tame a number of years ago now, John Tyzak, with Andrew as well, my friend Ray. And we fished there. And I think I may have talked about it on this podcast, actually, that it's one of those sort of things when I think I'd fished with John before. I can't remember. But there was a fish rising and the four of us standing there, and we were all either being really, really polite or didn't want to have the first shot. And I sort of got pushed to the front, and thankfully the fish felt incredibly sorry for me and ate the fly and bit it well. And I managed to hook it and land it. So I felt a whole lot of pressure off from there. But like you say, a proper urban river, isn't it? And I know we pulled out a BMX out of the river there and all sorts of stuff there. Yeah, it just goes to show, doesn't it? Despite everything we throw at these fish, they're still there trying to eke out a living. It's amazing, really, in some respects, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the resilience of these trout is just incredible. Personally, I've always pictured them as quite a fragile species, and this conditions that they'll live in, and especially big fish, the Tame in particular, its numbers aren't that great, but weirdly it produces some really good fish. And I mean, in the newspapers, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, it was reported that it had the highest concentration of microplastics in the world, oceans or rivers. So to have anything living in there, to me, is just amazing.
Yeah, I think it was on Paul Whitehouse's program about rivers, wasn't it? I think it featured on there, and they were talking about all these microplastics absolutely coating the bottom of the river. Is that is the one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. And again, it makes me respect these fish even more. It also makes me wonder if sea trout are running rivers like that as well, because you said the population isn't great. Do you think there are sea trout? Have you seen evidence or signs of them running the river there?
We've caught fish in there that look sea troutish. I've caught one in particular that had a distinct scar in front of its dorsal fin. That I caught it when it was quite silver, and caught it I think 2 or 3 weeks later, and it was darker. But that fish was up above some what you'd class as impassable weirs, so it's really hard to say. I know the goit does. The goit gets a run of salmon now as well. They've installed fish passes higher up the river, and they've had repeated successful spawnings on the goat for quite a while now, with like video evidence and stuff like that. The tame, I've not seen anything of. I know someone actually did catch one in the lower river, but if that's just one that's got lost on its way, I don't know.
Yeah, they could easily do that. Perhaps they're poking around, having a look. And I know I've seen pictures of, I think it was in Norwich or somewhere, in the centre of Norwich, somebody called a 6 pound sea trout or something
Wow.
like that. They're having a go wherever they possibly can. It was interesting for me that you said about the tame, and it can be mixed from a hatch point of view. So does that mean that you've sort of got locked in, that you know what hatches are going to work there, or do you sort of fish there or turn up there and then think, right, okay, I'm going to fish that, we'll see how it plays out, and if there's nothing going on, will you move and head somewhere else, or will you stick it out?
Yeah. So for me personally, it would be more of a short, maybe hour or 2 hour trip. There's only specific sections where you can expect to catch a fish on a dry fly, and you could pretty much just take two patterns with you: a large dark pattern and a midge pattern. That is basically all you'll ever see on there. It's quite interesting, to be honest, but it can have a good hatch of large darks. We went early season, and it's probably one of the best hatches I've seen so far this year. Had 2 hours of just great fun.
And do those fish rise readily to them? Because I often say on here, I don't know if our rivers, I've got a theory now, whether it's right or not, somebody much smarter will work it out. But because my home river runs off the north face of Dartmoor, that the water keeps a little bit colder and they don't start rising for a bit. But there and on a stream like that, it's a pretty good chance they're going to be rising to large darks early on in March.
Yeah. If the flies are there in a decent number, and there's a reasonable density of them on the surface, they seem very willing to come up to them. To be fair, yeah.
And you talked about two patterns and an olive pattern. Would I be right with something you have like a jingler and a midge pattern, an F-fly or whatever that may be? Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that. And do you carry few patterns but variations in different sizes, or lots of different
Yeah.
named patterns?
Yeah, so the main pattern that I use, obviously fishing with JT mainly, I've picked up off him his pattern he calls the JT Olive, a quill-bodied fly, generally in a size 16 for a large dark. And then for the midge, I'll normally go for a small duster, so around a size 16, have him tied in an 18 as well, and more recently, should be getting later in the year, onto a 14 as well. That's been working quite well recently.
That's a great one, and that's a great classic fly as well. And do you tie them with a black body or with the traditional? Because it's almost like an Adamsy type colour, isn't it, a duster?
Well, the ones that I use are with a really nice fine dry fly dubbing in like a watery grey colour, and that's been working great for me.
Yeah, fantastic. I've been using, I don't know if you've tried them, it's another old pattern, the old ever faithful Griffith Snat. Do you ever play with that at all?
I've used them quite a bit in the past, sort of 3 or 4 years ago, but it's not something I've explored recently. I mean, I've been tying more and more, sort of expanding my horizons as the season's been going on, and they all work. It's just you go back to what you're confident in, don't you? And you'll always end up putting on your most confident fly first, and more often than not, they're willing to take.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. I think I like the Griffiths, and again, in my mind, that I like the footprint of it. I think there's a hint of terrestrial about it as well. So
Yeah.
it sort of covers a few bases for me. But yeah, I'm fascinated to hear somebody much younger than me and cooler using a duster as well. So very pleased to hear that. And you talked about the tying. Do you tie? Are you one of these people who ties in the winter thinking about summer, or are you somebody who ties as the hatches are happening and a situation arises that you think, oh, I might need one of these actually, based on what you'd seen the day before?
Yeah, so I know quite a lot of guys that will spend the whole winter tying. For me personally, I'm out fishing all year round. So I'm more of a tie the night before kind of guy. It probably doesn't do me too well because there's times when I'm caught out. Like on the weekend, I could have definitely done with some aphids, and yeah, didn't have any of those. But I think for me, I would much rather be out in the winter fishing than sat behind the vice, unless the weather's too bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't tied a fly for goodness knows how long now because I just haven't got the enthusiasm for it. Perhaps it'll come back one day, but there are much better fly tyers around than me, and it's nice to support their endeavours. And my friend Warren as well tied me some beautiful Catskill mayfly patterns that I'm going to hopefully use at some stage very, very soon. But how would you describe yourself, Tiger, as an angler?
I'd probably say I'm an all-rounder that leans towards the trout. Trout fishing will always be my favourite. Well, I'd imagine anyway. But I've sort of progressed my thinking onto, fishing for what's best at that time of year. Um, it's like what they say with like seasonal veg, eating what's in season. I'll fish for what's in its prime. So for the early season, the trout, and then moving on to the summer, I'll go for maybe bass or even barbel. And then autumn, winter, salmon, pike, grayling, and it keeps it exciting. I've really enjoyed taking that sort of approach, and find that a lot of it crosses over, the techniques and styles, and it's sort of helped out all my fishing in that regard.
That's a really good call. And, given the summer that we'd last had as well, do you see those slightly more, they're not really esoteric now, but the species, like you say, the bass and mullet, again, popular. Do you see that becoming a larger part of your summer fishing when the rivers, if we're going to have the summers that we've continually been having the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to just be a trout fisherman, I think I'd be sat on my hands for a majority of the season. Even now, the rivers around me are almost at summer levels, and I don't really want to be fishing for trout in those conditions. With high temps coming and low water levels, I think it's better as an angler, to go for a more responsible sort of quarry, and better for the fishing itself. It's tricky fishing when the rivers are this low.
That's very, very nicely put. And I think many of us will. I've sort of, while you said that, and it was beautifully said about, you said vegetables and a menu, as it were. I think more of us, consciously or subconsciously, are becoming more that way now. And I'm like you, that trout will always be my first love. But I'll fish for anything where I think it's appropriate. And like you say, I'm trying to set something up with some mullet right now and thinking about that just in case. And, I was due to be going salmon fishing tomorrow and it just doesn't feel right to do that right now. So yeah, I think mixing things up, and I think that's where we'll hopefully continue to get the growth in these other species that continues to push on. I've seen them before with pike and bass, and they've sort of been there always in the background, but they're coming more to the forefront. I'm really, really pleased and excited to see that. So that's great. And coming back to you as an angler, are you somebody, because I know you talked, you might fish a couple of hours and see how it goes, but are you somebody who likes to fish long and hard, no lunch break, and just fish through and grab every minute you can? Or are you somebody, I think I know the answer to this, having fished with JT, or are you somebody who likes to have a bit of lunch and take it a little bit easier?
Yeah, I am. I am always have been, and probably will continue to be for a few years. Someone that sort of grabs every minute I can, and it's a hard one for me to explain to. I've got friends that I go fishing with that aren't like that, and they want to go for a nice picnic and stop and chat, which is lovely to do. But for me, I want to make the most of my fishing time, and I know that a minute or two passes, then could be a fish that you don't catch or a fish that you don't see. Especially dry fly fishing, scanning the pools, walking up and down through pools, just hoping to see that rising fish. That I could miss an opportunity for a good one.
Nice. I like that. And so does that mean then that you prefer to fish alone, or do you like the company of somebody and you take it in turns, or because of the way that you're fishing now, does that suit you better to fish on your own?
I'd say I prefer to fish with company. My main sort of fishing partner would be JT. I mean, we live down the road from each other and we fish a lot of the same spots. So that makes sense for us. And I enjoy watching other people catch fish as well. And, they're really having a good laugh on the bank, taking the mick when someone puts it in a tree or snaps off. So yeah, I do enjoy the company of fishing with other people, and I think you learn a lot from other people's approaches on how they fish. So as many people as I can fish with, I will do. Yeah.
That sounds perfect. I want to look at your fishing CV because in some respects it's almost a traditional one in that you moved from coarse fishing to fly fishing and then went from still waters to rivers. And was that a natural route for you to go? And how did you feel once you'd gone to still waters to moving rivers? What was the difference for you? And was that a defining moment for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I always enjoyed my time fishing on still waters. And I'm appreciative of the time that I spent on them and the people that I met. But it's a bit of a known quantity, fishing in still water. You know what's in it. You know roughly how big they get and what you're going to see every time you go. I can't remember exactly how we got the idea of moving on to rivers, but from the first time we went, my brother caught two amazing fish. I think about 2.5 pound and 3 pound on a dry fly for his first ever river fish, and that was that. Then there was no looking back, and it was really tough at the start because we had no clue. But yeah, there was absolutely no looking back. I've probably been and fished a still water twice since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So the learning process and going from a course background into fly fishing, casting is obviously an integral part and one of the differences, I guess, in the course scene to the fly fishing one. Did you how was the process of learning to cast for you? Was it an easy one? How did you go about doing it?
So I think the first time I ever cast a fly rod was at Stonebridge Trout Lakes in Yorkshire. I don't even know if the place is still open or not, but the guy that ran it then gave us loads of help, and the actual fishery manager was brilliant. He gave me a box of flies, showed me how to cast, caught my first fish on a fly there, and then from there I was very lucky in living down the road from Stockport Fly Fishing Supplies, which has since closed, but got tons of advice, casting help, and yeah, I think because I was quite young at the time still, I picked it up quite quickly. Learning stuff like the double haul and so on took a bit of extra time, but getting the basics down was fairly quick.
Nice. And yeah, Stockport was I hadn't been there, but I remember them being quite a presence at fishing shows, and good stuff there as well, wasn't it? And, I only heard good things about it as a fishing store.
Yeah, a great shop, and the guys that ran it were just even better, such a shame to have lost it, but it's a pleasure to have had it when we did.
Yeah. It was fascinating for me what you said about the Stillwater stuff, and you told me that you'd fished some trout masters, and I did. This was my brief flirtation into competitive fishing, in that I qualified for a trout master, and I used to just fish, buzzers, just let everything swing round and slowly retrieve them and stuff like that. And then I went into the Trout Masters, and I remember doing it the night before, tying up huge, great lures, and thought, right, well, I'm going to rip these things through, and that's how I'm going to catch loads of fish. And that put me off competitive fishing. And it's each their own. It's just my personal thing, because I fished for fun, and I fished in a way that I never would normally have fished. Now, that may have worked on the day. It turned out that it didn't. But you did some Trout Masters and stuff like that. What did you learn from that process?
So it was quite an interesting one, the Trout Masters. Firstly, in the fact that I had to compete against my brother in the qualifying round. Luckily, just beaten by one trout. And then the final itself was held at where it all started for me at Stonebridge, which is quite funny. And it went amazingly, apart from the fact that I couldn't tie my own knots at the time. And because of that, I think I got snapped by something like 8 fish in the final, which would have won it for me, which was a bit of a nightmare. But, I mean, I suppose it taught me to not be afraid to fish naturals, because most of the people there on the day were fishing lures like cat's whiskers and that sort of thing. And all my success came to beetles. I didn't know it at the time, but they'd just done a cutback on all the reeds. So I'd picked the perfect fly, and they were hammering terrestrials that day.
That's great. And did you actually notice that, or was it blind luck?
I would imagine it would have been blind luck.
Oh man, I was really expecting a great story then. I'd been practice day the day before, and I saw they were cutting everything, and so I thought there might be. But that's how it can be sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah. So you moved to river fishing, and what was the biggest change you had to make going from Stillwater to Moving Water?
Well, it's quite a funny one, because you transfer over to the rivers, and you still water box anything dry fly related. You're looking at foam daddies, hoppers, that sort of thing, that I suppose if you put it in front of the right trout will work, but for the most part you're casting things probably 4 times the size of what it needed to be, and lures and maybe buzzers are the real thing that crosses over. So that's what we had our most success on in the early days. And then we actually had a day booked out with JT, and I've got to say, it just transformed our fishing. So if back then I went to the river and caught 3 trout in a day, I was really, really happy with that. That was amazing. And we went out to one of the Yorkshire rivers with John, And between me and my brother, we had 80 fish between us, fishing Euro nymph style, French leader fishing, and never look back. Never look back. That was it. Bought French leaders, kitted out, and that is how I fished for the next however many years. And the numbers of fish that I caught skyrocketed, and then you've got the confidence, to move on, try new bits of river, and sort of go exploring, knowing that you've got the technique that'll catch your fish.
Nice. And tell us, if you were to pass on some information about euronymphing, what would be the most important thing if you were explaining to somebody how to euronymph? What would be the most important thing that you were looking for to give you that edge or to help you catch a few more fish? What would that tip be?
I'd always put it down to with nymphing is reading the water. I know it's something that gets talked about a lot, but actually putting it into practice, I actually bumped into a guy in the local river the other day that had never caught a trout, and got talking to him about nymphing and was setting up with an indicator. And just as I was walking off, he caught his first trout, and I was explaining to him about reading the foam lines, where the foam is generally the food and then the fish, and then for the time of year, picking the pace of water and the depth, for what your water temperature will be and where the trout will most likely be sat. So I'd say picking the right line in the water, you don't have to fish the entire pool. You can concentrate your time and energy into a small specific area and replicate that on the pools to actually have your most efficient time spent in the river and probably catch more fish that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm, if I were fishing, and I'm just like you really now that I just fish to a fish that I'm looking for to rise. But I'm exactly like you that I think what you're saying is play the averages and then
Yeah.
move on. And that's how I think I would do it. And I'll fish. And I was fishing with a friend the other day, and he said, God, you're quick through there. And I said, look, I'm just playing those averages, I think, or the odds where I think most a fish will be. And it was a moorland stream a little bit further down the system, but not far. And so I thought, kind of knew where I thought fish would be through my drive, where I think it would be. If nobody took it, I might give it another one, but if not, I'd move on. Is that what you're saying as well? You're looking to cover water and see as much of it as you possibly can.
Yeah, definitely. Especially more so when I'm exploring on my home rivers. I know that with the population being low and mainly big fish, I could spend 20 minutes in a pool the size of like a family car, constantly, like maybe 3 or 4 times even, putting the fly through the exact same line. And so many times I've fished through a pool for 15 minutes, and on my last cast, I'll get a real good fish, which I know a lot of people think for like French nymphing or Euro nymphing that the result will be fairly instant, which for the smaller fish or if you're exploring is like a great principle to work off. But sometimes for the bigger fish, you do have to almost wind them up, antagonize them with the nymphs a little bit.
And does that involve for you then, will that be jigging of nymphs or will that be a changing of pattern? How would you go about doing that if you use that word antagonizing?
So for me, once I fished through somewhere where I believe there would be a trout naturally, I'd always start off with the most natural presentation, dead drift. Normally I'd go for quite a natural looking nymph in clearer water, with maybe a raw tungsten bead and no flash or no hot spots, and then progress to jigging it through. And I'll only try that once or twice. And I probably wouldn't change my nymphs in that pool, but if I carried on not getting fish where I think I should be, then I would change my nymphs, definitely. Go for something flashier, like a red tag or something with a silver bead, gold bead. Luckily, I don't find myself having to change flies too often, and I'll normally stick to 3 or 4 patterns through the entire season, just varying the size and the beads for the day.
And I was going to ask you, that was my next question about weight as well. If we know that if we're clicking bottom, we know we're in the ballpark, but will you say you don't use many patterns at all. So does that mean weight will come into that a little bit more as well? And you may decide I need to go a little bit heavier or I need to change things up a little bit. Will that be more in your process than anything else?
Yeah, definitely. Luckily for my rivers being fairly small and not too forceful, I rarely have to go anything over 3.5 mil beads, which is quite nice because I know a lot of the guys in like Scotland or Wales will regularly fish like 4.5 mil beads, and I imagine that is not too convenient to be fishing.
Yeah, your life flashes in front of you as they come flying over the top, I would think, as well. But that's some really interesting insight into that I think listeners will enjoy hearing about. And again, it comes round, and we talk a lot about it on the podcast, and you've alluded to it early on. And again, we don't need a lot of flies, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my box for the start of the season has just been so boring because that's all I've needed. I mean, the last probably 3 or 4 trips out, now that the terrestrial seem to have started more and it's picked up in that sense, I've found myself changing flies 3 or 4 times before picking up a fish. And I know John wrote about it in one of his recent posts. We probably spent an hour swapping flies, sizes, leaders, tippets, everything, and eventually getting them to take. It's been quite interesting to see how the fish's behaviours have changed due to what they're taking.
Yeah, that's part of the love of it for me, I think, is trying to figure it out. And then when you see that rise and you set on it and you think, that's a job well done. And I think when there's 2 of you, that's the great thing about fishing with somebody, that you're bouncing those ideas off of each other. And it's like you said, I don't care if it's a buddy who catches the fish or me. It's been almost a team effort and just equally as rewarding. And especially when you've made that change or called something and it's worked, there's something special about that, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because there's normally 2 of us that'll be fishing, we can approach from like opposite ends of the spectrum. So I might go down to a size 18 or size 20 F fly, and John could go up to a size 12 March Brown emerger pattern, for example. And generally, in that first change for each of us, we'll get the reaction that we're looking for.
Yeah, nice. Tell me about streamers as well, because I know there's something that's on your radar or has been. What did you learn from that for people listening? Again, what is a takeaway that you had from streamer fishing? And then perhaps we can move on a little bit to how you were fishing streamers as well. But what, again, for somebody looking to fish streamers, what if you, again, bumped into this person on the river again and they were fishing streamers and said, well, we're not catching anything? What would you say to them?
So first off, with the streamers, before I even think about what streamer I'd fish, I'd look at where I'm fishing and what the river height is. For me, the river height is the most important thing by a massive long shot. So having the extra flow, I find will give the fish much more confidence. Any sort of colour added to the water, major confidence boost for the fish. And the colour of water that I've caught fishing on streamers has been pretty interesting at times, where you can barely see your fly 3 inches down, upsizing to a much bigger pattern. Can have great results. And I mean, the fishing is so enjoyable. It's great.
And I wondered about what you were saying there as well, because I know my best streamer caught fish has been where it's been not high enough for salmon, but too high to throw a dry fly and too much colour in the water as well. Do you think that bite is good then because there may have been a prolonged period of fish not being able to eat, so that they'll come on the feed for those sorts of things? And like you say, the visibility of the water may not be so good. So as a result of that, anything that sort of catches their eye, that could be food, and they're probably a little bit hungry. Do you think that's where streamers play into our hands a little bit more at those times too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the noticeable difference in the aggressiveness and the success rates of using a streamer in those conditions is massive. You can't not see it. I think a lot of it as well is with the reduced clarity, bait fish are probably more often, or more likely, should I say, to get washed down to the trout without noticing it. They'll be an inch away and suddenly they'll see a trout in front of them, and at that point it's already too late. So I think the diets might change for that reason as well, to be slightly more focused on the bait fish or whatever it is. I know a lot of the trout locally will eat crayfish, and you get some really nice fish that will have a claw down the mouth or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating point. I hadn't thought about it from that point of view. And I've also talked about streamers in the past that, and this may come down to clarity now that we've been talking about it, that sometimes you sort of, and I call it the fish escorting the streamer off the premises. So it's almost like they're not going to get out of, it's more territorial than food related. Do you think that has something to do with the clarity there as well, when it's a little bit clearer that perhaps they're not going to bite it quite as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that early into my streamer fishing, I was thinking, wow, I'm missing a lot of takes here. And then when you actually watch closely what the fish are doing, I know a lot of the streamer guys that might be listening to this will know it themselves. You see the fish slashing at it. They're not making an attempt to eat it or to grab hold of it. It is like they're just trying to say, get the hell out of here. And the fish that you'll catch in clearer conditions, for the most part, will be just lip hooked right on the edge of the mouth or something like that. Whereas when it's more coloured, you can almost tell that the fish has tried eating it. I've had 5-inch streamers that you can't see until you open the fish's mouth. It's pretty remarkable.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really, really cool. And the take is something special too, right?
Yeah. You've got to have your wits about you when you're streamer fishing, And one of the biggest things for me is not just bringing the streamer to a rod length away. Bring the rod sideways to you until the streamer is either in line with you or even past you, so you can see if there's anything following it. And then, like the musky fishermen will do, almost do a figure of 8, with the rod if you've got a fish following. And so many times they've hit it, after that turn, and they've started coming back upstream, they'll take it.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. So, how do you set up when it comes to streamers? What are you fishing? Are you fishing 5, 6 weight? What sort of density line? Are you sticking with the floating line and getting deeper if you need to with heavier fly? How are you setting up?
So I've got 2 different approaches, really. Normally depending on, the height of water for the most part will dictate what fly I'll be using. I've got 2 main patterns that are the Martin's minnow and an ice pick, which is an articulated fly, really effective. So in clearer, lower water or in smaller streams, I'll fish the Martin's minnow, which I actually use my dry fly rod for that, which is a 9'6", 3/4 weight, on a floating line, just an old dry fly line. I'll use 4 foot of, say, 10-pound tippet, and in the smaller streams, I'll spend my day just bow and arrow casting. Won't make an overhead cast all day, and just bow and arrow cast into any structure behind a rock, bush, tree, and just not even retrieving the line almost, just doing all the action with the rod tip. And then if it's, say, a decent sized river, let's say the Goit, in high water, I'll go with the ice pick or maybe a Kelly Gloop sex dungeon, something like that, and that'll be on a streamer tip line, so like a sinking tip line, and I'll mainly cast upstream and retrieve back down, or in certain pools where say the current's strong or it's quite deep, or I've not had success casting upstream, I'll switch my angle of retrieve and maybe go across current, or I'll swing it, with a sink line, put a few upstream mends in to get it down deep for them.
And I'm guessing you're varying your retrieves, your stripping, your figure of eighting until you find what works for you. And I guess the water you're fishing too.
Yeah. So my main approach has always been stripping. I'll rarely figure of eight in the rivers because mine are too fast for that almost. But one of the things I found last summer, which was a first for me, in really super clear water in summer conditions almost, the fish just weren't responding to the usual Martin's minnow, and in the end I put on a sex dungeon, and I was almost fishing it like a lure fishing style retrieve, like a pause and jerk. So I would twitch it with the rod and I'd leave it for like 3 or 4 seconds, and it's got quite a slow sink rate, so it sort of hovers as it falls, and after like 3 seconds of it being static, the trout would come and smash it, which I'd never experienced before, but will be something I'll be definitely trying in the future, because these are pools that I'd already covered and would have said that there was nothing in.
And I was thinking about where you were bow and arrowing with Martin's minnow, which I have some, and they are a fabulous fly. They're quite a challenge to cast any sort of distance, like you say, on lighter stuff, but it's a phenomenal fly. And like you said, flipping that into pockets, that would lend itself quite well to jigging as well, wouldn't it, in those little pots that you're hitting them in?
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people fish them on the bottom of like the French leader setup, and we'll maybe fish a run with the nymphs and then put a Martin's minnow on the point fly and jig that through. And I know that a lot of good fish have been caught that way.
Yeah, no, it's a great pattern. Big fan of it myself. So you're sort of concentrating more on dry fly these days, and it seems to me that you have a deep understanding of the previous techniques that we talked about. What made you want to is it part of your evolution as an angler as well, or you just kind of really enjoy seeing a fish come up and eat a dry? What was it that you're fishing this way predominantly or most of the time now? Was there a reason for this, or was it part of your evolution as a fly angler?
I'd say it's a bit of both. I've done it, here and there in the past and enjoyed it, but never got very technical into the dry fly fishing. I've never fished long leaders or anything like that. I've just heard some great stories from anglers that I fished with, of casting at 7-pound brownies on the edge of darkness, and I thought it was quite a hole in my fly fishing artillery, sort of, that it's not something that I was any good at or knew much about, and I wanted to fix that. I quite like learning and expanding my horizons sort of with my fishing, so it was about time that I got better at it.
Yeah, it's coming across to me that when you go to learn about something, you learn about it thoroughly and then have a great understanding. And the way that you've spoken about the methods so far have been really, really interesting, well-reasoned and well thought out, and spoken about with great experience as well. So if somebody's listening, let's say you're on one of those rivers that you talked about, you've been scouting, and that can take some time, can't it? Particularly on some of the rivers that you've mentioned earlier. Let's say you've seen a good fish rising. Talk us through what your approach is going to be. So would you be walking banks? Would you be walking the river? That scouting process leading up to where you make that first cast at the fish. How do you go about that?
So for me personally, I'd always take the bank option, if possible. Some of the rivers of fish, you have to get in the water and, for example, wade down to the pool that you want to fish. There's no access, if it's industrial in a town. The other times maybe it's a high bank and you can't, walk the bank without spooking the fish. But I'd always go for the bank option. And for me, assessing the current first would always be like my go-to. Because on a lot of these rivers, you've got a current line on your side, dead water in the middle, and then a current line where the fish will be feeding. So if you made a cast straight across, then you're just going to get drag instantly. So assessing where you've got to make the cast from, where you're going to stand when you make that cast, and how you're going to make your cast always comes first. And then trying to figure out what it's eating. If it's taking subsurface or if it's taking duns. And then, pick your fly.
So you've done that and you've picked your fly. Let's say you've made that cast, everything's gone to plan, you've sussed out the drift and you've got the drift right, but the fish doesn't take. So what happens next for you? Are you going to fire that fly again? Are you going to wait? Are you going to think about a change? Are you thinking other things? What is the next part? Let's say the magic doesn't happen first time. What happens next for you?
So, from what I've heard from other anglers and picked up off them is that, you sort of almost playing a game of chess with the trout. It makes its move, the rise, you make yours the cast, and then you wait for it to make its move again, especially with big fish. So I'd wait for it to rise again, make sure you've not, put it down slightly. Because I think a repeated cast over a fish that's on edge will spook it and, put it down for a long time. So wait for it to rise again, and then I'd put another cast over it, with the same fly before then, if it got rejected the second time, changing pattern. And usually I'd go smaller first, quite a safe port call, and go from there really. Maybe downsize my pattern, and then a duster or something like that, midge pattern, is always quite a non-scary option to put over them before maybe moving on to something bigger, like a March Brown emerger or an Olive Upright emerger, something like that.
And I think that's a fascinating point that you made there about, and that's one that's worth hanging on to, is check to see if it rises again, whether you've put it down. I think that's a wonderful point. And I with the midge that you mentioned there is a great call, and the masked hatch that we talk about a lot on here, that you think they might be eating olives and then there's something else in the background, gives you that clue. And I know it's wonderful when that's probably, I don't know if you feel the same, but it's probably my favorite, that you think there's a hatch of, let's say, large dark olives, and you're giving them the large dark olive and it's not, and then you spot that other hatch, that micro hatch that the fish are keyed. Is that pretty cool for you too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been fishing up north a little bit this season, and you'll see these massive March Browns coming down the river, and they're dead clumsy on the water, flapping around, and you're thinking, right, that's what they're taking. Why would you not be taking anything? Why would you take anything else? You've got these massive meals coming down, and they'll just be ignoring them. And you won't notice it at first per se, but you'll put a March Brown over it, nothing. You'll look at it and you go, oh, it's taking like a medium olive, for example. Switch fly, first cast, bang. And, you'd think that a large, wild brownie, like a fish of, say, 3 pounds, something like that, it would be taking the biggest meal it could get, as much protein as possible. But I think that's the nice thing about trout fishing, is that every trout's different, and they're always keeping you on your toes of their behavior and what they're feeding on.
Yeah, and that's another great tip. Size is better often, isn't it, to go smaller? That's the best best bet, I think, probably in these situations. And terrestrial, something I know the answer is going to be yes, because you mentioned aphids already. Are they beetles, ants? Are they things that you're considering as well as things warm up a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. I've had quite a bit of success recently on APTs that I've tied. Just a classic, and really they cover so many different options, don't they, of what they represent to the fish. And just by varying the size of them, you can pretty much cover most things. So that's probably my go-to terrestrial at the minute. I definitely need to branch out and tie some aphids, though. I can tell you that much. It's frustrating watching a big fish feed and knowing you've not got the right fly for it.
Yeah. I guess I know what you're going to be doing a little bit later, but yeah, having those ready. I think I've got some in my fly box, and I don't use them a hell of a lot, but they've helped me out in the past as well. And certainly the terrestrial thing, I've found with a difficult fish, sometimes giving them something completely off the radar can sometimes, and I use terrestrials as that example, can bring them into play that are locked on fish. Not all the time, but it's cool. I can still think of one last year that it was a fish that was rising consistently. It was in a really difficult position. I may have even talked about it on here, so apologies, listeners, if I have. I had a 2-foot drift before the tree stump on the far bank was going to take the fly round the wrong side of it. So I had a really short drift. I had it planned out. If I hooked the fish, I was going to run out, lock on it, and see if I could keep its head out. And I cast several flies, didn't eat them. I thought, I've got an ant in here, a foam-bodied ant with just a hackle around it. Let's give him that one. And he ate it, but he ate it so hard that he broke the hook. Literally, when I set it, it was such a good-sized fish. And it just went straight in and went into that log jam before I could do anything, just broke it. And those moments. So perhaps, yeah, if listeners, I'm sure you probably, because if you're listening to this, I know we talk about terrestrials a little bit, but it's worth having some on there. My friend Duncan caught a huge great trout on one of his beautiful beetle patterns in a about 20 feet upstream from that spot as well. So yes, they're definitely worth having if you haven't. And the nice thing is they're really easy to tie as well, aren't they? Beetle patterns with a bit of foam and everything else. And the all-purpose terrestrial is a great example of that. But I know I've bought some more terrestrials this year to have a mixture of stuff just in case that we need it. But that's been some wonderful advice. You've talked about these sizable fish. I live in the part of the world, and I've been fishing up on the moor where you've got to hit those fish really quick. But when I look for these bigger fish, it's almost New Zealand time to set on them. Any advice, because it's so difficult, isn't it, when you see that nice sized fish come up and you think the magic's happened? Any advice on setting on one of these nice fish if you get lucky enough to hit one?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be really, really slow with them. You watch that nose come up, appear, go back down, and then you can almost wait another half a second before you strike on some of the fish. I had one at the weekend that I had a nightmare with. I was throwing everything at it. Really tricky spot and a really good fish. I wouldn't like to say how big, but it was probably £5 plus. And I finally got it to take on, I think it was a paraduster. And just the whole thing got to me and just pulled it out too quick. And the fish had absolutely hammered the fly and all. And it's one of those that no matter how many of them you've caught, or you've hooked, or you've caught that day even, sometimes the moment will just get to you and you'll miss it. And I think it's just important after you've missed one to think why you've missed it, because it's quite easy to forget about the fact that you need to wait a little while. And then once you have hooked one, don't clamp the line. That's the next thing. With the light tippet, I normally don't go below 0.12 on the tippet. just because with the chance of a big fish, I don't think in my rivers anyway I could land most of them on anything less than that. Just because they know every nook, cranny, boulder in the river, and they're such dirty fighters. They really do know how to use them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I fish 4 pound, and I've not noticed that's made any difference. I was fishing 3 for a while, and they were beating me up a little bit, and went up just a tiny bit, and it's made zero difference to me on the stream that I fish that way. But yeah, that's some great advice, and I sort of in my mind try and play out the scenario before I've made the cast. So I'm sort of mentally prepared for it, and I think about the cast I'm going to make. I think about, right, okay, if there's a tree, how do I set on it? I think about all those things, so it's not a surprise. It's not a foregone conclusion because I love it, because it's not. But it's almost in your mind. If that fish comes up, everything has gone to plan. So I know that I don't strike whatever direction I have to do. So everything's prepared. Do you find that helps as well? Do you go through a similar sort of thing or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I'm approaching a fish that I know is a good fish that's rising, I'll look around the pool to see where it's going to take me. You know, whether or not I've got to get it out of there as soon as I hook it, or whether I can let it do its thing a little bit and tire itself out. And something that I've got from lure fishing, surface lures, in the warmer months, is that I almost can like envision a fish taking the lure, whilst I'm just bringing any cast in, or whilst I'm watching the dryer drift down. I'm getting ready to see the fish's head come up, like it. I know for certain it will do, which obviously it won't. But like you say, you don't get surprised by the fish. Then there's no nasty shocks, and just be focused on the fly, because there's been so many times where I've heard a noise and looked away, and out of the corner of my eye you see the splash from the rise. Yeah, focus and expecting the take.
Yeah, nice. And this segues beautifully, because I was going to move on to salmon fishing, and I know you do that as well. And do you do similar with do you envisage the fly swinging round while you're fishing? Because I sort of kind of think every cast I make, every swing, there was a fish behind it, or a fish rose up. Are you thinking that? Is that part of your process as well?
Yeah. So when I'm fishing on the swing, I'm always looking to where I think that fly is in the water, in the first place, and I'll follow that area around on the swing, hoping to see any sign of flash, or boil, or even the fish taking. And I think a lot of that's come from hitch fishing. I fished the River Carron up in the Highlands, and unfortunately not had great water levels in the past, so most of it's done on the hitch. So you get an idea for how the fly will behave and what speed it'll swing at. So I think I picked that up from there. But yeah, if I'm fishing an area where I've seen a few fish moving, I'm expecting a take. And you know your key areas, don't you? Where there's like a relaxed bit of current where you think a fish could be sat, and you're ready to set the hook in those positions.
Yeah, nice. And how would you describe what it is like when you make the connection with the salmon?
It's a tricky one. It's a mix of emotions, elation, because you finally got one to take, fear because you think it's going to come off. Yeah, I mean, one of my fish that I caught last year was on the hitch, and been fishing for 3 days with nothing seen, nothing caught, and a couple of casts into the pool, maybe a rod length and a half out. A fish took on the near bank just below my feet, and it came up, head and tailed it, saw it swim back down, and I set the hook too fast. And I was just really lucky in the fact that on the next cast, it came back up, same place, same time, and I managed to watch the fish swim back down with it. And I gave it ages before I struck. And I mean, everything. My knees were shaking, heart was going like mad. And yeah, I was lucky to hook and land that one. And I've never really had that sort of feeling or level of emotions almost catching any of the fish than it has been with the salmon. Maybe because I've built it up in my mind over the years as show that next level up almost. But for me, every salmon that I've caught, it's just been super special. They are such special creatures, aren't they? And with the diminishing returning numbers year on year, just seeing them is amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They are a fabulous, fabulous fish. You've been fishing a while now. How does the fly fishing landscape look to you right now?
It's an interesting question because, it's having some promising ups. I'd say, with the expansion into other forms of fishing, bass on the fly, mullet on the fly. I know is massive, especially down south near you. You've got like Colin McLeod that's written his books on mullet on the fly. The groups that are growing on Facebook and other forums. You've got carp on the fly, pike on the fly, which is massive. I saw that one that you had the other day. That was a great fish. Yeah, I mean, in that point of view, I'd say great things are happening for fly fishing. It's going to attract so many other anglers from so many different aspects of fishing. I think it's going to pick up quite a lot of anglers from lure fishing, especially bass fishermen and pike fishermen. I speak to so many people on the bank that are interested in that. And once they realise that, you can come to a canal that you either don't have to pay for, or it's like a £5 a year, really accessible for them. You've not got to worry about expensive memberships or, cliquey groups of clubs. That I think the uptake in anglers will be quite significant. But then also there's a lot of clubs that won't have many anglers in under the age of, say, 40. So from that point of view, it's slightly concerning. But I think these sort of new aspects to fly fishing will help outweigh that and bring a lot of growth.
Yeah, well, I sincerely have got my fingers crossed that that's going to happen for it as well. We think fly fishing's cool, and the people listening will. And you're considerably younger than me. How do your non-fishing friends view what you do as a pastime? Do they think you're weird? Do they think it's cool? Do they think it's interesting? How do they view it?
I think probably at a younger age, it was seen as like a weirder thing to be doing, to be going spending your weekends out on a river or the bank of a lake somewhere. But I mean, since leaving school or growing slightly older, there's not many of my friends that haven't asked me to go fishing. And whether they'll just do that once or twice, or they've now got their own setups and they'll go fishing without me. A lot of them like it just to be out in nature, go out and have a nice day, whether that's on an estuary somewhere or on the river. I think a lot of them are keen to try it out and experience.
Yeah. Did any of your friends actually take it up then as a result of coming with you?
Yeah. One of them in particular, I think within about 3 weeks of going fishing for the first time, he'd watched every fly fishing video on YouTube. He was mad keen for it. Yeah, there's been quite a few people, to be fair, that have picked it up, and whether they still do now is a different matter. Everyone has fleeting interests and hobbies that they'll do. But for me and a couple of lads that I know, fishing will always be that main point of interest.
Yeah, nice. Do you have a dream destination? Is there somewhere that you've always wanted to go that you think, yeah, if the chance came, you may have been there and you might want to go back. Where would you like to go?
So the one that's been up there for, I don't know, probably 5 years at the top spot was always the Atlantic Salmon Reserve. After watching their documentary that they put out, I couldn't pick anywhere else higher on my list for that. Obviously, that is very expensive. I know they've got the youth programs that they've done there, but I don't think that'll be open for UK guests for quite a while anyway, with everything that's going on. New Zealand is on the top of everyone's list, isn't it, really? If you've got a fly rod in hand. Where else is there? I wanted to do quite a bit of exploring of, Finland and Norway. They've got a lot of opportunities for the sea trout fishing, actually on the open coast. Swedish archipelago for the pike, and Norway for its amazing salmon fishing. I think those are the sort of destinations that interest me the most.
Nice, good answers. And I was expecting you to say New Zealand first, and that was a wonderful surprise, your first choice as well, because New Zealand is, yes, it is Mecca, but it was fascinating that you went for salmon first, and that was a really interesting choice to hear. Sea Trout in the Sea, I can only keep recommending it. It's just one of the best things, and I love it. I love every single second of it. Now, you've spoken with great knowledge. You think you're clearly a thinking angler and take something from the river every time that you visit it. And you've spoken so eloquently and thoughtfully about these things that I know listeners are going to enjoy and hopefully learn a little bit from as well. But have you ever had, because we sort of live in a world now where you may think that social media may imply that everything goes to plan, everything happens as it should do. I think I've got so many train wrecks that I could make a whole podcast of it. Have you had anything, though, that has gone spectacularly wrong that's quite amusing that you fancy sharing with us?
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many, honestly. Whether it's been going up to Caithness years ago and going and trying to do it without seeking any local knowledge, picking out some locks that you know are great, but they're massive expanses of water, and you can pay £40 a day for the boat and not see a fish, never mind bump one, and it's a bloody long way to drive, to catch a fish or two. Trying to think anything that's happened that would be a funny one. I mean, I've had some pretty dour blanks in the past few seasons, but I suppose I've been lucky in the fact that I've not had any major failures where I've been and I've snapped my rod on the only fish that I've hooked, sort of thing. I've been lucky in that sense.
Nice. Well, that is perfect because that ties in perfectly with everything you've spoken. I almost didn't ask you that question because you've given us so much great information that I didn't want to bring it in. But I think it's always nice that we can share these things with each other. We can laugh about them. I was thinking about one, somebody streamed a bit of bank and he said, "Oh, it looks really good. You should have a look." And I trod on it and it gave way and I went headfirst into the river. Which is always amusing. Yeah, those and guiding where you fall in and stuff like that. They're just, it happens to us all and everyone gets stuck in a tree. Everyone misses a fish and we're all human really. And we do it because it's fun more than anything else, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, now you've said that, I've remembered one I had fishing one of the canals over the Yorkshire Way and the bank had been strimmed, and I think it was whilst I was going to net a fish for a friend. I went to stand on what I thought was grass, and it was actually just trimmed grass, and just went straight in the canal. That was quite a humiliating moment.
Yeah.
Ended up in a soaking canal midwinter, but it was worth it. We got the fish in the end.
Yeah, that's the important thing, obviously, as well. And then you deal with that afterwards, don't you? And I'm not one of those. I'm high risk that I don't take a change of clothes, but perhaps wintertime it may be worth it. But we shall see. Tiger, we've spoken well over an hour, and I feel as though I've only scratched the surface of your knowledge of fishing. It's been wonderful to catch up with you. Can you tell us, if people want to find you, what are your social media handles?
So yeah, I've got my Instagram page, which is Tiger Stamp Angling, just straight like that, and then my Facebook is just Tiger Stamp, and those are my two social medias for my fishing.
Fantastic. Well, I would look out and keep an eye on what Tiger's up to, because it is really, really cool. He is doing great stuff on the water. Tiger, it's been brilliant to have you on the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, there'll never be any charge for these. They're always free to download. And I hope you've got something out of our chat today as well. It's been fascinating. Like I said, it feels as though we've only scratched the surface, but hopefully you'll pull some nuggets out of our conversation today. There'll be plenty more podcasts coming very, very soon. But thank you so much for listening to the Fly Culture podcast.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.